It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. It's the end of the world as we know it. And I don't know how to feel. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but since USC and UCLA announced that they were leaving the Pac-12 to the Big Ten, I've been a little beside myself. Certainly, I believed that conference realignment was going to be a consistent event for the next 10 years in college football, but I really didn't believe something as seismic and this big of a shift would happen so soon. Now, I wanted to make this video when the news first came out, but honestly, we don't know that much more than we knew almost 6 weeks ago now, with the exception of the new signing of the Big Ten media deal. So I thought I'd put out a few thoughts about what this might mean. I think it's kind of an interesting backdrop for what seems to be a really exciting start to a good college football season. People are back in the stands. If you look at all the games on TV, a good portion of the good games, if you will, have plenty of fans there. I think people are excited to be back. We're back to normal a little bit and watching some good games. We got some blue chip programs that are up, some that are down, and of course we got those underdogs that are surprising everybody, which is why we love college football. Let's talk a little bit about what this means for us. So the first thing that I think was interesting to hear was that this was not a play by the Big Ten, but it was more of a play by USC and UCLA. And I find that a little bit funny. I mean, obviously we talk about rivalries. This crosstown rivalry is one of the best, and it truly is crosstown. I mean, there may be 30 minutes away from each other, but they worked together in this case because they decided to get together and leave the Pac-12. So clearly it's not them, or it wasn't the Pac-12, it was them. They were looking for different ideas. I'm curious to see how this plays out and find out what exactly they were thinking when they decided to make this move. Well, we know one thing. It's definitely all about the Benjamins when it comes to seismic shifts like this. If you look at that map, and you can see just how far USC and UCLA are from the core of the rest of the schools. I mean, it's funny. We used to think of when Penn State got added, it was just a little bit outside that footprint. Then Nebraska was added, and it was also kind of on the same opposite side, a little bit outside that footprint. And then Rutgers and Maryland really took it even further. But now it is coast to coast, baby. So the money must have been really good, or at least the idea of money must have been good enough for them to be thinking about what it means to send all of those Olympic sports back to the Midwest and to all the way across the coast to the East to be playing. I mean, the implications of what this is kind of crazy. One of the things, one of the resources I look at all the time is this guy over at D1 360. He does a really great job breaking down the numbers. I'm not sure where he gets it all, but I think they're legit. Most of his sources are legit, and he allows us kind of really see why these things look appealing. If you look at this, and he did this video several weeks back now when it just happened. And if you look at those numbers, and they've changed a little bit since then, looks like the SEC and the Big Ten are far and away the two most lucrative, I guess you might say, or at least have the biggest numbers in the Power 5 conferences. And we know that the Big Ten Conference recently just re-signed a new media contract worth close to $1 billion. So I'm not exactly sure where that lands them. They might have the most eyeballs and money at this point. The notion of super conferences seems pretty imminent. If you want to break down the numbers, go ahead over to D1 360. That guy, he's got a lot of great information. He does them for all the conferences, and it's really helpful to kind of get a much better objective view rather than just what the hype is. In my other videos, I talked about all the reasons that conferences like to realign. I mean, typically people talk about money, they talk about, media contracts, but there's a lot of reasons to be affiliated with other schools and conferences. I will say this, there's a bit of institutional likeness and fit if you look at the endowments of all the schools now in the Big Ten, or the Big 16 as we're going to call it, they're pretty close. Not, some of them are outliers, but they're pretty close in their endowments and how they fit. We have Northwestern, which is a private school. USC is a private school. You've got, most of them are state, flagship universities. UCLA is kind of a flagship. I mean, it's, it was sort of the baby bears, the Bruins next to the Cal there. So, but they, as far as size and endowments and research universities, they're pretty good fit. The real thing is that the distance is a big deal here. You got to try to figure out what is it that they're thinking beyond the monies. Who knows what it is? The one thing that this solidified for me, though, was that indeed the Power Five conferences are probably looking to make a super conference, right? Like it's kind of there, and so the changes in college football, that's pretty seismic. Look at all these changes that have happened, say in the last 5 years. I wouldn't even say it was the last 10, but the face of college football is changing at a rapid pace, and a move like this is evidence of that. I'm not exactly sure where people's heads are, because the implications, I think, are really, if anything, it could destroy what's great about college football and kind of making it more of a professional sense. So I've been talking about the implications. This is really the slide where we're going to break it all down here. I just mentioned the notion that, these sports teams they're really focused on sports first rather than being a student athlete. We kind of knew that already, and when the NIL rules got changed, and when the NCAA kind of got rid of their whole mandate for what they were doing this summer, if I were a university president, I'd be a little bit worried about where all of this is taking the university as a whole, the university community as a whole, right? Like, what is the state of academics? What's the relationship now between, schools that are going to travel cross country like all the time? We're talking about not just football, but Olympic sports, all the other sports. If you're in LA, you're now flying to Chicago, to Madison, to Minneapolis, to New Jersey. Anyways, they're flying, all of those teams are flying now across country all the time. They truly are semi-pro athletes with NIL, with this. I'm not even sure what the relationship is with the school now. Clearly, traditions and rivalries, not that important to USC and UCLA. I'm trying to think of the other rivalries that they've got going besides each other. UCLA and Cal, because they're sort of in the same system, probably has a bit of a rivalry. Stanford definitely, had UCLA's number and USC's number for a while. Oregon's always Oregon, Washington, really kind of round out the Pac-10, Pac-12, whatever you used to call it. But yeah, clearly that's not too important to people these days. It's interesting to me to watch this notion that regionality is reserved for the smaller conferences. If you look at what the Sun Belt has done, they got rid of what they might consider their baggage, and they, on purpose, consolidated the schools that they have together in that southeast region, so that they have schools that they're now within driving distance. And that's a part of their strategy, which I think is actually going to save college football, because that's what we love about it. We love these rivalries. We love the underdogs who can beat anybody on any given Saturday. And you've got to be able to go and see your teams. But in these super conferences, that doesn't seem to be very important. The one thing that we know for sure is that the Big Ten Pac-12 alliance was basically talking points. I think everybody kind of knew that, but this is, it's pretty evident now based on that. And I mentioned earlier, what does the elite super conference look like? At this point, it's almost imminent that they're going to separate, that the Power Five or some version of the Power Five, or what used to be the Power Five, may separate into a super conference. It could be FBS, FBS Junior, and FCS. Clearly, the broadcasting contracts were important to these large schools, and like I mentioned, I think Big Ten just signed for like $1 billion a year. I don't know what's going to happen with Pac-12. I'm going to call it the Pac-10 now, right? Because it basically is. But The last I heard was that there's rumors that Washington and Oregon may join the Big Ten, although I heard the commissioner say like they weren't interested in expansion, but I don't know if you can believe anybody's word at this point. They just kind of seem to do what they want to in the dark and and figure it out. Pretty possibly the Pac-12 could dissolve if they have any more defectors. I think Commissioner of the Pac-12 said that they didn't, or Pac-10 said that they didn't expect anymore, but nobody expected USC and UCLA to work together to leave either. So at this point, it's anybody's game. I'm surprised that there isn't a line in Vegas for this stuff. There might be, and I don't know about it. One thing that concerns me, because I love the Rose Bowl, I love the tradition of the Pac-10, Big 12, or the Pac-10, the Big 10, Pac-12 invitation, and that has changed since we've had the playoff, college football playoff. Is what's going to happen at the Rose Bowl now? Because that was such a part of tradition, and that Rose Bowl to me is really important to college football. It was the first bowl game. And it's the granddaddy of them all. And, what happens to bowl seasons? Now, we did recently just have the announcement of college football playoffs are going to 12. Again, things are changing. I'm not sure if it's for the better. We'll figure it out as it goes. But these implications are big. It's not small. In my opinion, it's a bit dangerous. It's certainly cavalier for sure. Because one of the great things of college football, I think, as compared to the pro game, is clearly the camaraderie, the engagement, the attachment to the schools. And all of these moves are jeopardizing those kinds of things. Let's take a look at the map here. This is your new Big 16. Look at that. It's clearly two outliers with a few core schools. And there it is. That is amazing to look at and to think about what's going to happen, especially with travel. And hey, by the way, we just went through a worldwide pandemic. Who knows what the future might bring? Are we going to be prepared for something else that might take us down? I mean, this is crazy, right? But certainly something to talk about. Here's the new Pac-10, which actually seems pretty self-contained and still kind of interesting, but it does lose its luster without USC and UCLA there. It just seems to be not quite as exciting, I suppose, and maybe not worth its Power 5 moniker. Utah's doing well this year, but they're a real recent success, I would say, in the last 15 or last 10 years. Colorado's down. Let's see here. Oregon put the thumping on BYU the other day, so they're probably doing all right. But Oregon State and Washington State, they're sort of middling in the Pac-10, and they can make a comeback for sure, as always, but makes me wonder like what's going to happen to the Pac-12 or Pac-12 Pac-10. Yeah. And of course, we take a look at the Big 12. Now the Big 12 has an opportunity to pounce on some of these schools that might make a good fit into what the Pac-12 is doing. It's always a question, though. Would more schools dilute what's going on there? One of the things I think is really exciting about the Big 12, by the way, this is Big 12 without Texas, Oklahoma, which will be, I think, next year is when that happens. But is that we've got some up-and-comers, schools like BYU, they've been doing well the last few years, and so they're definitely going to be a marquee team in the Big 12. But Kansas making a great start this year. They're 3-0. I think it's really early to get super excited about them. Lance Leipold's in his second year of coaching, and so he still doesn't have the talent that he's recruited yet. So they got to get through their Big 12 schedule yet. But it's still exciting to see them play quality football, not win some games and not just win it because the other team lost. You know what I mean? So Kansas is up there. I think the Big 12 is actually going to be pretty exciting. Now, if you think about what they might do, is I would consider the likely 4 invite into the Big 12 to be Colorado, and the 2 Arizona schools, and then Utah, and then kind of make a Western division there, and then they would have 16 as well, right? So that might put them on equal billing, say, as the Big 16. Certainly not in money, but definitely in eyeballs. I think you got some big fan bases there. Clearly, Baylor's been up there, and TCU. I don't know. They're sort of I don't know what their following is. I mean, they've been good, but they don't have a huge fan base. Oklahoma State's always there. Kansas State's always there. West Virginia, they have a following. So, but Arizona, the 2 Arizona schools would really help, kind of give it a shot in the arm. So that could be interesting, I think, and I think they make a pretty decent fit in what the Big 12's doing there. It was fun to watch Rich Eisen react to this. I think he had the same kind of reaction I did, which was kind of like, hey, folks, moves like this, they're hard to come back from. It's definitely a new world order, folks. It's really the creation of a new Super League. And I do think it was accelerated. I think you mentioned it too. It's accelerated by the NIL. Now that these kids are making their own money a little bit, it definitely changes how schools are going to be recruiting, how they're working with athletes, and how you're going to develop teams, because that transfer portal now becomes more important. It's really a very different situation. College game is changing and more to be like the pro game, and like I said, I'm not sure if that's good. I'm not sure if that's bad. I fear it's going to lose the appeal that college football brings, but it all remains to be seen at this point, and we've got some exciting moves coming up in the future. It definitely is the end of the world as we know it. Please leave your comments. I'd love to hear your perspective and your insights, what we've learned over the last several weeks, and yeah, we'll see how it goes.